Hi, this is Gowri.
And you're listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. And today we have a very interesting discussion on our ABC focus.
Yeah, we are discussing about the MH17, of course, which is
Mm-hmm.
the hottest issue in the country. And we will also be looking a little bit at the Russia and Ukraine conflict along with it.
That's true. So for the MH17, I would say tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is something that was very shocking last week when it happened. I still remember. I was in. I think I just hang out with you, last week at
Mm-hmm.
night, and then after that when I came back, I was looking at my Facebook and all my social media networks, and all I was seeing was news about this MH17, and I was like, what is it? Is it the same as MH370? And it turns out to be a totally different sort of tragedy.
Mm.
Apparently, it was shot down by air missile, and straight away was brought down to Earth, and also it was straight away um, exploded in the middle of a very peaceful um, field in eastern Ukraine.
It is a tragedy, and we still haven't really recovered from MH370. And when I first heard the news, I was really hoping that it wouldn't be true, that it's just another gossip, another speculation. But sadly, it was true, and I was devastated to find out that 298 people died because they accidentally shot down a plane. I think that is an unacceptable uh, reason or an unacceptable scenario as it is,
Mhm.
because they always make contact with any plane that comes into your territory, and you talk to the pilot first, and you ask him to reroute or to leave the zone. You don't just even if that's another issue, whether they're allowed to fly there or not. But
Mhm.
even then, you don't just simply shoot a plane because they are flying in your zone. You make contact. You converse with the pilot. You tell him to get out of the war zone. If he refuses to do it, still, then I don't think it justifies the fact that you just shoot down a plane with 298 innocent people in it.
Mhm. I definitely agree with that because when I was looking at the news itself, it was very shocking because almost 300 people died just like that. Although
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, the war in Gaza was happening as well, and also right now about 400 people has already died in the Gaza um, bombings. And but talking about the MH17, what I noticed also how diverse were how diverse the victims were. For example, there were 190 something passenger who
Mm-hmm.
were from of Dutch citizens, and then 40 something citizens were from Malaysia, and the rest are a combination of Canadians, British, Australians, and and Indonesians as well, Philippines, and a few other countries more. So I think a lot of the prime ministers and presidents from all these countries were shocked as well, and they demand for justice for the victims of MH17.
And another thing is also about all the interviews. I think we watched it a few days back on TV3, which I would like to bring out when they were interviewing the what they call the keluarga mangsa at that time, and it was still fresh after the incident, and all these people were in tears, and they went over to interview these people to find out about their loss as well. And it's probably not a very sensitive thing to do uh, for me, I think. And uh, they need some alone time because it's so much of a shock that a plane just flying over a territory just got shot down like that, and you just lose the person you love just like that in a blink of a
I think
second.
for media, their perspective is
Mm-hmm.
about getting newsworthy information out there, and I think interviewing lost ones is definitely part of the radar of this
Mm-hmm.
media. I totally am with you, right, regarding on the sensitivity surrounding the victims' next of kin. I think they should be left to grieve, and also to be at peace rather than trying to ask all these questions that are actually trying to create more grieving towards the victims' next of kins. And talking about, you mentioned earlier on the flight routes. Actually, the flight routes are not something that is the problem of the MH17 or any other flights that were following the flight path, because it was definitely approved by this organization called ICAO, and the ICAO itself saying that, hey, we approve this flight path, and all these airlines, commercial airlines, are following it, and they definitely do not go against the international standards and all that when it comes to the airlines standards. But at the same time, a lot of I noticed in the social media, a lot of netizens were actually blaming the flight companies themselves for not being concerned about if the area that they were flying over is a war zone or not.
I actually have 10 other airlines here, according to this article that I have, that flew on exactly the same path that Malaysian Airlines was flying. And some of them are the Jet Airways, the Thai Airways, Bellavia, Lufthansa, UIA, Indian Air, Aeroflot, and also Singapore Airlines.
Yeah, and talking about Singapore Airlines, their Facebook were a bit insensitive, that it caused a minor, I would say, conflict between the netizens and also the airlines themselves, because they didn't really admit that they were flying on that path, the path that overflying the Ukraine zone. But actually they were, and it was clearly shown in the television itself, in the video itself.
And also the Indian Airways was actually just a few minutes behind Malaysian Airlines, and the Prime Minister of India was actually in that plane as well.
Can you imagine if they if the missile went to another one instead of the Malaysian Airlines? It would be an even bigger issue, I think.
Why is that?
Because you kill a prime minister of a country, and India is one of the biggest economy in the world. So there's definitely a very sensitive issue there. Talking about the victims, what I want to highlight is the victims are very diverse, and there are many heartbreaking stories. I mean, I saw in TV3 how they interviewed a lot of different victims from Malaysia, and a lot of them, are families, some even a family of 6, together with 4 kids, and the husband and wife themselves die in just like that in the MH17 tragedy disaster. And some were couples, going on holiday. Some were even prominent researcher on AIDS. For example, there's this one guy. He has been doing a lot of really groundbreaking research on AIDS, and he also died together with other scientists on that particular airplane, MH17.
I read that news as well. They said the cure for AIDS could have been on the plane, but now it's gone for good, and we'll never know if we could actually get a cure for AIDS, because that scientist was pretty close to achieving some significant results in his field. And also, like you mentioned, there were couples who just fell in love, couple who were doing a long distance relationship, and this one girl was back after meeting her boyfriend, and now she's a lot of heartbreaking stories. Of course, that took place after the MH17 incident, and whoever who did this has to definitely pay for it, except that no one is taking blame for it, are they?
I don't think anyone is taking blame for it. And I think we will talk more later after the break on the geopolitical war in Ukraine and Russia itself. But now, focusing on the MH17 victims, I want to highlight the AIDS researcher that I mentioned earlier, Joep Lang. I think that's how you pronounce his name. So he's an internist and also professor of infectious diseases at the University of Amsterdam, and was among those who died at the MH17 crash. And he has been doing really prominent research, like you mentioned earlier, to find a cure for AIDS. And it was a really prominent AIDS conference that actually happened this weekend, 2 days ago, and they really were very sad of the passing of a few scientists which were on board on the MH17. And what about victims from other countries? Do you have any stories? For me, I read one story of a victim from a victim from Amsterdam. He's a florist. He make a black humor, a dark humor. He said that before he on board of the flight, he said that, oh, if if the Mars airline gone missing, you know where to find it. And he took a photo of the airline MH17 itself, and who knows, it was blown away. And now, it's really an irony that he was making a dark humor and it really gone missing and was blown into pieces.
I saw that photo as well. It was very scary in a way because he just meant it as a joke. Like, okay, if the plane goes missing, this is what it looks
Yeah,
like.
it's supposed to be a joke, you know.
Yeah, and who knows that the plane really did go missing. That it was shot down, and it was totally unexpected. And I think that also, in a way, it reminds us of how life can be so predictable and how anything can happen anytime. And also the bodies that were found where the plane was shot down, it turns out that the bodies were scattered everywhere, and some of the valuables are apparently missing. Some of their wallets, their passports. So in a way, it's also really hard to identify the bodies after retrieving them.
Actually, the bodies were thrown over from air down to the ground, just like that, because it was it exploded above ground, and a lot of the bodies were being thrown away in really serene feel, like even they were even thrown into this patch of sunflower field, and I thought it was the most ironic way of seeing death, because when you picture sunflower field, you will picture happiness and sunshine and all that, but now what you see are dead bodies on this field. And what I feel verified that the crash site, when I look at the crash site, it tells a lot of the stories, especially from the luggages, from the things that were you can see on the ground, like diaries of a young girl. And for your information, 80 children death, and also I think 3 infants also were part of the list of passengers that were victims of the MH17.
And I also have some other victims here one of them who is from Malaysia, who was traveling for a wedding in Malaysia from Netherlands, and she was traveling with her colleague, who is a Dutch guy, and he apparently lives in Melbourne, and they work in finance together. And there's also another one about a Victorian family of 5. 5 of them, all of them actually died, and it was confirmed on Saturday as passengers of MH17. And the guy is Dutch, and his wife is actually Malaysian, and 3 of them were heading back to Malaysia.
So following from your view just now regarding on a lot of items being stolen at the crash site, and actually a lot that's true, a lot of it being looted, and what's left behind are things that are like passport and wallets and laptops are all being stolen or taken either by the separatist group or the people who were living there. But I want to credit for those villagers who are living nearby. They really respected the bodies, because from pictures that I saw, they actually covered white cloth on the dead body itself, because the dead bodies weren't being taken over to a more secure site until I think yesterday or the day before yesterday. So actually it was there for 3 days before it was taken into a more secure site. And the international team also is on the way. I think a few international teams are, a few members of the international team are already there, but they are not really allowed. They are not really allowed to go to the crash site and do their investigation. I think they will be allowed probably later on.
So going back to what you said earlier about the bodies being thrown out of the plane because
Mm-hmm.
it blew up, another one of the effects is also that a lot of the bodies were found without clothes.
Yeah, it was reported
Yeah.
in The Economist actually on that.
Uh-huh. I actually read it on another article, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the same news, and
Mm-hmm.
it seems that uh, something like that can only happen when a body is traveling at a very high speed.
Mm-hmm.
And it says here that in this case of MH17, the bodies could be cruising at about nearly 33,000 feet above sea level where the plane blew up, and that caused most of the bodies to be stripped naked and to rip off all their clothing before they landed.
Another interesting point raised by The Economist is all the bodies were found with no blood, no stain of blood. Seems like they just died just like that without being hurt by anything. Although there were some bodies that were being charred or being burned, but that's because they were they were in the explosion itself. But those that were being thrown away off air, they look like they were sleeping.
That's
So yeah, it's
interesting.
very interesting. And another thing that I felt that was something um, out of that was something very gruesome when I was reading The Economist is the way it depicted all the dead people. Some of them without head, some of them die in a very horrific manner. Some of them have the expression of the passenger itself in shock, in fear. You can see the face of the person in fear, even though the person has already died. So it was being described as a living hell, going to the crash site and seeing all this dead body with their faces looking in a horrific manner.
I guess the only comforting about that is an opinion by one of the expert here who said that none of them could have possibly been alive when they were being thrown out of the plane. They either have already died or they must have at least passed out by falling at that speed
Yeah.
from air. So hope all we can hope is that they didn't have such a torturous death, that it was quick and not painful, and that they are at a better place now.
hmm Anyway, we will resume our discussion again with more information regarding on the geopolitical war, as well as the responses by all the governments and all the important actors, international actors, regarding on the MH17 tragedy.
Voice of sharing, durian ASEAN.
Hi, welcome back again. This is Arlene,
And this is Gowri.
and today we are going to discuss about the MH17 tragedy and also the Putin's geopolitical war that is happening in Ukraine right now. So as we are speaking, there were a lot of responses by the public as well as governments and international actors. What I can say is the public were very sympathetic. You can see throughout social media, even even the radio station and I think in Malaysia itself, like every media and every public are talking about it, and they are definitely saddened by this. I mean, our previous encounter on the tragedy of the MH370 hasn't been really properly healed, and it only happened in March this year, and not and now in July it is there's another tragedy with MH17. So I think a lot of Malaysians are really hurt by what's happening, and they definitely are very sympathetic towards the victims and the family of the victims. But also the radio station, I mean, what I want to tell you is I noticed in all the FM that I'm listening, and also television and all that, they were really highlighting, like their condolences towards the victims and the family of the victims. What else did you notice in terms of the responses?
I guess the song choice also, they stopped playing all this upbeat EDM music. It's a lot more toned down, a lot more sensitive to the people, and they. I think that's definitely a very very good move that they are trying to be more sensitive to the people as opposed to, still playing those upbeat music.
Like in Australia, the Prime Minister of Australia, Tony Abbott, attended together with the family victims and representative from Ukraine as well, a church service to commemorate the victims of the MH17, especially the Australian victims. There's one victim, she lost two relatives and of hers in two of the flights, MH370 as well as MH17. So for her, it's definitely a very devastating episode.
And even in Malaysia, a lot of the, I guess, NGOs and also the government themselves have been starting to help these people. I guess one of the first moves they did was to send a psychologist. I think they employed nearly 20 psychologists to send to each of the family and to talk to them and help them deal with the situation, which will definitely be very, very helpful at a time like this.
Actually, I really salute the responses of the Malaysian government. Najib was very swift in terms of his response towards the victims and also the perpetrator.
That's another thing that I wanted to bring up as well, because the moment we got the news about MH17, sadly, a lot of people on my Facebook said, there you go again, Malaysian Airlines. This is what you get from Malaysia. But this has nothing to do with MAS or Malaysia. It was just a plane flying. It got shot down by mistake. I think it's really inconsiderate or even ignorant of these people to say, oh, there you go again, it's MAS or it's BN or it's Malaysia. Like, this is so not the time to. It's inappropriate, and it's also really irrelevant as well.
I mean, for me, my politics is very neutral. I mean, I'm not pro any partisan politics. My politics is based on what's right for Malaysia. And I thought that for Najib to bring forward the issue of MH17 into Parliament is definitely a very positive move. I think for the government to include the opposition towards, providing more I would say support towards getting more push for the situation regarding on the MH17 is definitely something that I think is a good move in terms of the Malaysian politics. And especially for Najib to be very, I think maybe it's because of the experience of the MH370. I think the Najib's administration has become very responsive towards the issue of this, and it's an international issue as well. But in terms of the tone of Najib and especially Liu Tonglai, the transport minister that is responsible as the main communicator for this particular tragedy, Malaysia's responses seems to be very neutral, as in like they are not really against Russia, they are not even against anyone. What they say that we just need to find who are the perpetrator and why they are doing this. But for prime ministers of other countries, especially in the prime ministers of Netherlands and Australia, they were very vocal. They blame this on Putin. But what do you think about this, Gowri?
Based on the news that I actually read this morning, where US actually believes that this is Russia's fault, that they have been supplying weapons and missiles to these pro-separatist people in Ukraine. And US also believes that they may have hidden the missile that caused the plane to go down. So the missile is called the BUK M1 or the Buck M1. I'm not sure how to say it, which is the anti-aircraft missile system that was used last Thursday or Friday. And they also believe that right after the incident, these missiles were brought back into Russia and is hidden there, and which I think tallies with other news reports that says that some very important evidence is actually missing from the site where the crash took place.
Especially as the international community wants to blame Putin. I think when it comes to geopolitical issue, even the media is quite biased in terms of who they support. So it's interesting that when I first read the news, I saw RT. RT stands for Russia Today. One of their first news that they say that they speculated that the missile is actually being shot by pro-Ukraine or pro-Ukraine government missile, and instead of the separatist group, it stated that that's because the plane look the MH17 plane or the Malaysian airline planes looks exactly like the plane that the Putin were flying when I think he was on the way from Latin America to
Yeah, actually, I've seen the picture. It is scarily similar. I had no idea that there is another plane out there that looked so much similar to ours, and
except that the arrangement of colors is a bit different, but the color scheme itself is very
it's basically
similar.
Blue and red and with stripes as well, pretty much like ours. And no one would have probably thought that was a big deal, that the design is similar to another airline, but it actually is a big deal, and I think that is something that they can consider in the future. While
but that's the thing, like every media has their own bosses to call for. So whenever it comes to like things that related to geopolitical war like this, you always have to know like what the media position is, what's their stand in comes to their support towards which country. So when it comes to Russia Today, it's very obvious. It's pro-Putin media. So whatever media that comes from RT is definitely pro-Russia, and it's definitely saying that all the faults is Ukrainians' fault. But when it comes to media from Europe, from the US, and all that, it seems like they are pointing their fingers towards Putin. And you can see that in the Time magazine and in New York Times and all these key media that is against Russia.
It's also really sad that Malaysia has to get in between this whole crisis.
It is very sad.
Like
I think Malaysian stand is pretty neutral on this. We do not want to create enemies. I mean, our country is small enough that nobody would probably take notice about it.
I guess before this, all the countries in the world probably didn't even know what or where Malaysia really was.
Oh yeah, I would tell you that 10 years back or 5 years back, when I have to describe where is Malaysia exactly, I have to say that it's between Thailand and Singapore.
Then 10 years back, I met people 2 years ago that they from US, Europe, they couldn't tell you where Malaysia was. and yeah, you have to say the same thing, like it's above Singapore, it's close to Thailand and Indonesia, and then they would get it. But all of a sudden now, I guess everyone knows Malaysia. And
just say, that airline, that missing airline, and the airline that was being brought down by the air missile. So and the UN itself also is drafting an emergency meeting, Security Council meeting, to talk about the issue of the MH17. I think the international community is definitely taking notice. In fact, the G20 meeting, the recent G20 meeting, at first they only want to talk about economic growth and anything to do with GDP and all that, and economic cooperation and all that, but they can't help to talk about politics and international relations, because the situation in Russia and Ukraine is definitely affecting the international community. Can you imagine if they would send another air missile towards another commercial airline? I mean, this situation is unheard of. In the past, although I would highlight that in the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken, or 1980s or 1970s, Russia also brought down Korean Air when they thought that the commercial airline is supposed to be like their enemy's airline, when it wasn't.
Yeah, there were a lot of other planes that were shot down as well. I saw the timeline, and it's so unfortunate that this time it just had to be Malaysia when we were just at the wrong place at the wrong time, I think.
Unfortunately, we were at the wrong place at the wrong time. About the Ukraine war, a lot of Malaysians might not be aware that, but the war in Ukraine has been there for quite some time. I think the most prominent one is the recent annexed Crimea.
Yeah, that's right. And this conflict, if I may, dates back to 1991 when the Ukrainian parliament first was declared independence from the USSR, which is now Russia, following an attempted coup in Moscow. And that happened in a nationwide referendum in December 1991, where 90% of them wanted independence from Russia. And then there's just...
So they became part of Ukraine at one point. They want to be independent from Russia, so they became
that's right.
part of Ukraine.
And then after that, they... some people were not, I guess, too happy about that, and some were still pro-Russia, and there were just a lot of protests and demonstrations taking place over the years from 2010 to 2013. Then there was the Occupy Kyiv City Hall in December, and that was one of the biggest demonstrations with about 800,000 people that attended that demonstration.
But that was of a different situation, because at the time, I think the general public in Ukraine were against the government at that moment. They thought that he was corrupted and he didn't really provide the kind of security that Ukrainian wants towards their own self. So his policy is definitely very elitist and, only very much more towards nepotism and cronyism.
Right, and going back to the Crimean crisis, which you brought up, it involves Ukraine and Russia trying to both control the region, and I guess the current status of Crimea and
it's currently being annexed, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that's right, and it's not recognized by 100 member states of the United Nations. And the crisis unfolded in the aftermath of the Ukrainian Revolution. And in February 21st, 2014, President Viktor Yanukovych fled Kyiv, which is the capital, and the parliament deposed him the next day. And then they had another coup that happened, and the Russia accused the United States and EU of funding and directing the ouster of Yanukovych, and it just gets really complicated from there. I don't think we have enough time to cover that, but that's basically what's the general idea of what's going on with Russia and Ukraine.
So I guess when it comes to the war in Ukraine, it's very complex, because the history of the area itself, it was once part of Soviet Union, and now it's not definitely. But the people there, what I heard is majority of them are of Russian descent. So they are, I'm talking about the eastern part of Ukraine. So I think in terms of their allegiance, they are definitely pro-Russia. That also explains why the separatist groups are in a sense, they have full control on the area, not just Crimea, but also the full area of eastern Ukraine. And because they are at war, I think they are definitely, trying to be very more preemptive in terms of, attacks from Europe or from Ukraine government itself. When it comes to Europe, they are a bit mild in terms of their tone, even though Prime Minister from Holland was very vocal towards it. But when it comes to European Union as a whole, they are still not a bit hesitated in terms of trying to voice up their concern towards Russia. I think partly also Russia is a very huge force of power against European Union as a whole.
So speaking of that, on 21st of June, the US actually imposed sanctions against 7 pro-Russian leaders in the Ukraine, and the rebels actually agreed to observe the ceasefire proposed by the government until the 27th of June, saying that they will not disarm until the government troops leave the east. But however, a Ukrainian military helicopter was shot down in the east, killing 9 people. But the UN estimates that more than 400 people were killed in eastern Ukraine just between April and June. And then things got worse when the Russia's parliament cancels a parliamentary resolution which authorizes the use of Russian forces in Ukraine. And the EU leaders tried to do something about it, but it didn't work. And finally, I guess the EU signs an association agreement with Ukraine, where along with Georgia and Moldova, the president Petro Poroshenko describes as the most important day in the country's history since independence. So as of now, as of 5th of July actually, which is the most recent update that I have, the rebels abandoned the strongholds in the north of the Donetsk region and apparently fleeing to the south to the regional capital in the face of a government offensive.
Very interesting development there. Talking about economic sanction, it's interesting because Russia is saying that it's not taking a toll on Russia, but in actuality, all the economic sanction, I think Europe is doing a selective economic sanction towards Russia. I think they are sanctioning companies that is directly associated to Putin, because I don't think European Union are against Russia as a whole. They are probably against Putin himself because he has been a dictator, has been there with Russia for quite a few decades already. And even I saw in the American news, they say that Putin is still having that Cold War mindset, as in like us versus them, capitalism versus socialism, sort of like Cold War, Iron Curtained. But in actuality, the economic sanction did have did take a toll towards the Russia economy. For example, a friend of mine who is now working in Russia as a scientist, he told me that the price and also the cost of living, the price of items and the cost of living has risen up tremendously in recent times, where he said that even when it comes to the price of McDonald's, it has gone from a few dollars up when it comes. And he said that he thinks that it's because of the economic sanction as well as the war that is happening in Ukraine right now.
And also, I think I have just a little bit to add to that, where on March just this year, Russia has actually shown no inclination in the use of the NDN, which is the Northern Distribution Network, which is a key supply line to Afghanistan that runs through Russia as a leverage in the wake of the US retaliation for its troop movements in Crimea. And expanded Western sanctions in mid-March also affected the financial markets, which kind of hit the business interest of a lot of Russia's richest people there.
So with that, I think when it comes to the MH17, they're actually caught in between a really huge global geopolitical war. So it's not just about Ukraine, as a country, but also it involves major superpower like the US, Europe, even Australia itself is taking a huge force against the power of Russia. And I think Putin right now is definitely stuck in the middle, as in like he's not able to move anywhere, and he needs to gain friends if he wants to be seen as a positive force in the global economy. And especially Russia is a huge economy, and if he wants to win friends in the third world country, he should not make enemies. And I think the MH17 has definitely created a lot of enemies for Putin.
And I also have just a little an excerpt here from a Ukrainian guy who said that what they really want from Russia is basically just friendship. I don't know how true this is, but it's according to the article from Huffington Post. And he said that we want to foster relations based on trust with all nations, and we've made a significant stride forward when we rejected nationalism and granted a strong political mandate in a single round of elections to our new president. And basically, they just want Putin to show his respect to their own prime minister and Mr. Poroshenko actually, and they want these two leaders to have a good relationship.
Hmm. So with that, I guess we hope that the situation in MH17 would definitely turn to the better. As in, like we hope that there will be the international community will do the investigation, find the perpetrator, and hopefully there would be proper burial for all the victims there. And I think Prime Minister Najib also said that he wants all the bodies, all the Malaysian victims to be properly buried back in Malaysia, so to be sent there in safely. So
And of course,
mhm.
our thoughts and prayers are all with the families of those who are affected by this incident. We're thinking of them and praying for them and wishing all the best that they come out stronger from this tragedy.
Mhm. So thank you very much. This is Arlene signing off.
And this is Gowri. We'll be back again tomorrow at 8 o'clock, so don't forget to tune in to DurianASEAN.com.
Yeah, and also if you want to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, please do so. We would love to hear your comments and also sharing your ideas. And also if you want to get in touch with us, listening to us, if you don't have a laptop in front of you, what can you do, Gary?
They can download the TuneIn app on their smartphone and just look for DurianASEAN.com. It's as simple as that.
Thank you.